Among the priorities the President mentioned last night was the need to expand energy generation capacity. Let's get some reaction to that from Andrew Kenny, independent energy consultant, and Thabiso Tenyane, the executive chairman at Phakwe Group, which is an independent power producer. Andrew, to start with you, what does the announcement yesterday with regards to Eskom mean for the country?
Well, you've said some bad things, some good things, and some things you left out. Just to mention the good things first of all, the best thing he ever said was right at the beginning. He admitted we're going to have an energy shortfall between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts for the next 5 years. Just let's realize how bad this is. Right at the moment now, we've got very suppressed demand for electricity. The economy has been in terrible shape, and COVID has depressed demand even more. And still, we're still having blackouts. And as he says now, he used to say, oh, it'll all be solved in another 2 years. Now he's given it up. He admits we're in trouble for at least 5 years, at least 5 years. And if the economy does recover, which let's hope it does, there'll be more demand for electricity and we won't be able to meet it. That honesty, that admission is the best thing that he did. As for the way he's going to overcome it, that's very unimpressive indeed. Can I go through that?
Please do.
All right, first of all, he's trying to get an awful lot more solar and wind. Now, this is a complete disaster. Solar and wind are very good for off-grid uses, such as solar water heating and so on and so on. For grid electricity, solar and wind are a disaster, not only in South Africa, but all around the world. Our own renewable energy independent producer program, which has been going on for 5 years, has forced upon us the most expensive electricity in our history and the worst, terribly unreliable. This is not going to help. More solar and wind is not going to help us at all. Some of the things that will help us, he said we're going to allow embedded generation. This is from the big paper mills, Sasol, the sugar mills and that. They've got electricity generators on their plants and they can generate electricity to sell into the grid. This is a very good idea. This is a good thing.
All right, so we're going to come back to some of those good ideas that he's talked about, but obviously we'd like to have a chat to Thabiso. Now, as a business person in the energy sector, what do you make of the President's address?
Look, there are good things that the President is starting to have a grip of, because energy by its nature, it's a coded process in order to have the electricity and electrons on the grid. So therefore then we want to welcome and acknowledge two things for me which were critical. One, the timelines he has given to NERSA, that in 3 months' time, make sure that the regulations are there to deal with the embedded. The trick to that is the fact that Eskom's preparation for the wheeling tariff, because they need to transport. If the site is not closer to their own use, that power must get to the grid in order to get to the concerned private sector that requires that. That was a good thing. There were clear timelines to say in 3 months' time we want to see this, because we've been handling with this matter for last 5 years as to whether this exemption that needs to be granted, because people were going to NERSA was saying to the minister and get the exemption in order to do what you need to do. So we need to fast track that particular process and not frustrate the private sector anymore in order to be able to implement this. The second critical thing that I think the President also got it right was us as a country for the first time allowing Eskom to participate in the green and clean energy, because almost we were making our utility to be redundant and not being part of the puzzle of saying we need to have a just transition that migrate us to certain cleaner technologies. The country is now also equally moving into what we call technology agnostic. We're no more interested as to what can generate the power. What is becoming critical is the dispatchability profile. And is that going to be critical that when ESCOM requires power 5 o'clock in the morning, will they be able to get?
Interesting.
Is that going to be critical when power is required around 5 to 9 o'clock in the evening? Can they be able to get it? So that's the direction at which I think the president is starting to press the right buttons.
Excellent to hear that. Now, Andrew, just to get your reaction on ESCOM's ability to play in the green energy market.
Well, as I've said, green energy it's a misleading term. It isn't particularly environmentally beneficial. You're talking about solar and wind. These things need enormous amounts of material. So a wind turbine needs 10 times as much concrete, 10 times as much steel as nuclear per kilowatt hour. Isn't particularly clean, and it's very expensive and it's very unreliable. Thabiso, I agreed with most of what he said, but not everything. He spoke about the need for dispatchability. We must get electricity when we need it. So at 7 o'clock on a weekday evening in the middle of winter when it's cold, you must be sure of electricity. You can never be sure of that from wind or solar. So the green energy, wind and solar, is a bad idea for grid electricity. It's wonderful off-grid. A whole lot of small applications off-grid, solar water heating, small electricity generation in rural areas, wonderful. But for grid electricity all around the world, it's proved a tremendous failure, an expensive failure. If you look at countries, the more wind and solar they have on the grid, the higher their electricity prices, their final electricity prices. We don't want to go that route if we're going to get reliable, good, affordable electricity for our expanding economy.
So let's talk about the solutions. What are the solutions that the president should be talking about?
Can I give them?
Yeah, please.
Well, in the short term, there are no solutions. We cannot get good, affordable, reliable new generation onto the grid in the short term. So he says for the next 5 years, we're in trouble. I think it's probably a bit longer than that. In the medium term, by far the best solution is nuclear power. Unfortunately, our dreadful integrated resource plan 2019 doesn't allow new nuclear before 2030. As it so happens, we probably wouldn't be able to get it on the grid by then anyway.
But the two plants we currently have, I believe, only give us 5% energy generation or 5% contribution.
Yes, that's good, because there only are 2 units. 2 units of 960 megawatt each, which have given us the most reliable and the cheapest electricity in South African history. That's Coburg. It's performed wonderfully well. But there are only 2 units. There's only 1 power station. We need more. And we must right now start planning for new nuclear.
Andrew, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. Just get a reaction from Thabiso right now. Now, Thabiso, what has been your biggest challenge as a renewable energy provider?
The biggest challenge that I can tell you is, let's go to what is being referred to as the risk mitigation, right? Risk mitigation was very tight timelines which were given to private sector. And to the credit of also our financial institutions, which came to the party in that particular regard. However, private sector met those tight timelines. Now, the machinery on the other side, if you don't have clear timelines, which government posted on their website to be saying, these are the timelines which we give to private sector. This is going to be our timelines in order to announce this. This is going to be our timelines to do the financial close and the construction. If government is not in the position to plan enough and be on time in meeting those, then the reality and the frustration is there is no consequence management, which we're thinking that the president must also closely watch that particular process. or either they need to be, in order to give investors like ourselves and many other the confidence, it is critical that you adjust or amend those timelines and publish them again. But when you then get quiet, you're not amending the timelines, you're not adjusting the timelines. The president yesterday says, soon we are going to announce people. Soon is a very, very difficult word to interpret from a government perspective. But I want to respond to my colleague here that, Andrew, you probably correct, but I don't think we need to talk about which technology. As I said, that the country is starting to move into what we call a dispatchability profile. Nuclear, we all acknowledge that. But nuclear in itself, it takes minimum 10 years to then bring it to the commission. Now, the cost of unserved electricity in South Africa
I'm afraid we've run out of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking to us. I was speaking to Andrew Kenny, independent energy consultant, and Thabiso Tenyane, executive chairman at Phakwe Group.